Hello friends, it's Kat from Meow Kapow. This Inktober I went all in on making black and white repeating patterns out of ink. No idea why, it just struck my fancy and I ran with it. Like most tasks I set to myself, I went in with very little actual understanding of how to do things, but tons of foolhardy confidence that I'd make it up along the way, which I did, so I'm sharing my method with you in this two-part tutorial. This first part will teach you how to make the pattern by hand, and the second part will teach you how to scan and edit the pattern for use on whatever you need it. I'll specifically show you how to set them up for Redbubble since that's what I've been using my patterns for. To start, we need to gather a few tools. Everything I'm using here works well together, so if you don't already have paper and pens that work well together without bleeding, here are my recommendations. If I've reviewed something already, check out the iCards to see their videos, and per tradition, links are down in the doobly-doo if you want to get anything for yourself. First up, I'm using pre-cut sheets of watercolor paper because I had them already, and they're easy to work with. This option from Strathmore is relatively affordable, and they're not overly textured, which means you don't lose details to all the nooks and crannies. It's also not exceedingly thick, so they're easy to cut. The main pen I'm using is a brush pen, one which was heavily tested in my Ultimate Brush Pen Showdown series. The primary reason I'm using this one over the actual winner of that showdown is that the ink dries slightly faster, which for me, as a person who tends to smudge their hand through anything if it's wet, is a plus. This can be a bit tricky to get used to because its tip is ridiculously fine, but that also means you can get some really small details if you're experienced with it. That said, I also used fine liners for when I didn't feel like being fiddly with the brush. My preferred brand of fine liners are these Tombow mono ones, which are waterproof, come in 3 different sizes, and are under $10 US for the pack. In the middle of me recording this video, the power in my house went out, and in the confusion I ended up leaving the cap off the smallest one for over 18 hours. At first, I thought it was dried out and dead and was totally willing to accept the loss. So, to Amazon I went for a new set. In the meantime, for no real reason at all, I put the cap back on and chucked it back in my pen bucket. Within hours, it was working just fine all over again. I've had these pens for over a year, and I guess they're made with some sort of ink magic, so A++ recommendation from me. Because sometimes you just need to use a white pen, I'm using the Art & Fly white gel pen, which was one of the most surprising finds in my white gel pen comparison video. Really truly did not expect them to be as good as they are, and I'm completely in love. Because the patterns I'm making are specifically just black and white, it's invaluable for adding details or fixing up little mistakes. Oh yeah, erasers and pencils are pretty handy to have when starting out. If you aren't already familiar with this blue pencil I'm using, which is a clutch pencil, I made a whole video about them and why they're the best pencils ever. We also need a ruler and some sort of metal something to cut against with an X-Acto knife. I've got a clear plastic ruler that made it easy to see the measurements on, but I also used a piece of keystock to actually cut against. I go into detail as to what keystock is in my Skillshare bookbinding course, but if you don't already know about it or have some, seriously, it's totally cool to just use a metal ruler. Oh, or a paper trimmer if you've got one. Through the course of my tests, I realized I like cutting manually with an X-Acto blade more than I liked using my paper trimmer, but they both work just as well. The only gripe I have with the paper trimmer is it's sometimes hard to get accurate measurements on despite the ruler and grid, so I preferred to do it with my ruler. And if I was already there with the ruler, might as well just hold it in place and go for it with the craft blade. Almost forgot, we also need some tape. Any old regular tape will do. I happen to be using blue painter's tape because I have a ton of it. You just need something that you can remove when you need to, so I wouldn't recommend duct tape if that's what you were thinking. Okay, so we've got all our tools ready. What's next? Planning! On your sheet of paper, you need to start figuring out what and where you want your pattern. On this first pass, we need to focus primarily on making images in the center of the page and avoiding the sides and corners. This is due to the way the cutting and rearranging works out, and if you want to have a pattern that repeats smoothly, you need to leave the edges either fully clear or as clear as possible in this first stage. I recommend starting off by making generalized shapes for where you want to place your elements. I'm going to make little bats that are based on a plushie I sewed a few years back that has button eyes and dopey little wings. As such, my shapes work out just fine as random blob sizes, but you might want even rectangles or perfect circles or whatever. Personally, I like to make mine all different sizes and shapes to keep up the visual variety. Once you've got all those figured out, go ahead and sketch the actual images you want on there. You may need to change a few of them here and there, and that's totally fine, especially if this is your first time making a pattern. I started to get a better feel for things after the second or third attempt at these and figured out what I like in the finished look. Just keep in mind, you really do want to try and avoid going up to the edges during this step. Though you can sort of roughly guess where some edge guides will fit, it's best not to fully sketch them just yet. Now it's just a matter of inking those sketches. I'm working in black and white because 1, I like it, and 2, I think it's probably going to be way easier than making something in color. If I did this all in watercolors, I couldn't possibly imagine how the repeat would work smoothly, but I guess that's a challenge I could take on if I really wanted to someday. Don't be afraid to switch up which pens you use. There really aren't any rules about this. Maybe you'll discover a new, even better way of doing things just by experimenting. That's how it all happened for me. Also, if you're working in black and white with the addition of white pen, I recommend putting down all the black ink, erasing the pencil, then putting down the white pen. Mostly because by the time you get to this step, the black is completely dry, and you may be tempted to erase the pencil right after laying down the white, which may not yet be dry and smudge all over the place. So avoid smudges. Ink smart. Cool. So all of the things you slapped in the middle are finished up and hopefully not touching any of the edges. You'll see I mostly focused on the middle portion, though there are a couple of high flyers up at the top there. It's fine, I know they'll work out in the end, but if this is your first time, I recommend giving at least an inch of buffer space just so you can really play around and get comfy. One section that I really make a conscious effort to leave fully blank is each of the corners, because if you give a large amount of space there, your pattern will eventually line up to have all 4 of those empty corners touching, giving you a really big space to design on. I'll usually put one large element there, but it's also nice to have a variety of options with such ample space. Now, I like to label my quadrants because that's how this is going to end up. Eventually, we're going to have 4 fully separate tiles, and I have this absurd fear that someday I'm going to rip off all the tape and throw the tiles around and never be able to link them up again, which is truly ridiculous, but I digress. On the back, I label the top left corner as 1, top right as 2, bottom left as 3, and bottom right as 4. While looking at the back side of the paper, it makes total sense, but while looking at the front, it may be a bit confusing. No worries, you get used to it eventually. Previously, I used to make all the cuts I'd need for the whole project right now, meaning one that goes through the middle long ways as well as one that goes through short ways, creating a giant plus sign of cuts. But no matter what I tried, the pattern would always be somewhat misaligned somehow. With what I do now, it only gets slightly misaligned sometimes, but not every single time anymore. We're only going to make one cut right now, and I prefer to make mine long ways. All you need to do is find the midpoint of your paper, mark it up, and cut it however you prefer. I'm going for the manual ruler and hobby knife method, but do whatever you want. Once you do that, you should have 2 halves of paper, the first being just the 1 and 2 half, and the second being the 3 and 4 half. What you need to do is now swap those pieces, so 1 and 2 are now beneath 3 and 4. Line up the edges as carefully as you can, and then use 2 pieces of tape to secure them together. Why 2 pieces of tape? Because eventually we're going to cut down the center of those from the top, and it's easier if you have what will become the left and right halves already secured together. So, 2 pieces of tape with a gap in the middle, nothing too fancy. Once we flip the paper over to the side with the design, we should see that there's now a large gap of empty space right in the middle. Same as before, sketch out a design in there and ink it up. A bit of advice though, and you'll see why towards the end, but I recommend not having any crucial elements beyond the cut lines. If possible, build your design so only simple shapes and lines are on those cut sections because it makes things easier to clean up later on. There will usually, somehow, be some sort of misalignment at some point, and it's easier to clean up if all that's on those lines is solid white or solid black. But hey, this is your life and your project, so go cuckoo banana beans on it if you want. I certainly won't stop you. Anywho, I ink up them new doodles. Again, try to avoid making anything that goes right up to those blank edges just yet, because in the next pass we'll take care of that. Flip your paper around again, and this time we're going to be cutting it in half vertically. So, same as before, measure it out so that you're in the center of the page. Once you've got that figured out, take your knife to it and show it what for. The left half should now be pieces 1 and 3, and the right half should be pieces 2 and 4. Swap them so that 1 and 3 become the right half, and lay down your 2 new pieces of tape to keep it all secure. Flip it around to the design side, and there should be another blank space in the middle. By now, you should be able to see some sections of your design that are lined up and working. Get excited! We only have 1 or maybe 2 more passes left, depending on how much extra space on the edges you gave yourself and how careful you were being. The first couple of times I did this, I was always a little too careful and ended up needing to do 1 or 2 extra rearrangement things. Anyway, you're an old pro at this by now, so fill in that blank in the middle. At this stage, if there's any sides that have nothing on them, you should be able to suss out which halves to move around again. Because even though these are 4 individual tiles, it's really better to think of them as halves. You've got the top and bottom half and the left and right half. You always swap either the top and bottom half with each other or the left and right half with each other. So, we're doing that final swap. Home stretch! Remember when I mentioned before that no matter how careful you are, there's a chance things won't line up somehow? Well, I had a bit of that happen here. No worries, you have a couple of options. 1, you can save that as a problem to fix digitally after you scan it in. Or you can tweak it just slightly now. That's part of the advantage of doing these in just solid black and white, since those are simple enough to clean up by hand. If this was multicolored, I think I'd just leave it for the final digital cleanup and hope for the best. Whichever option for cleanup you prefer, don't forget to finish off the pattern and add in that last section. Remember back when I said by avoiding the corners in the first phase, I'd end up with a big beautiful space smack dab in the center at the end? Well, here's that payoff. And true to form, I largely filled it in with one big beefy dude that makes me happy with how doofy it is. And that's it. Technically now, you could photocopy a zillion of these, cut them out, and then line them up infinitely because the pattern totally works. But what if you want to get a sweet shower curtain covered in button-eyed baddies? Well, then the next part of this tutorial is what you'll need, where we clean up a digital file of this and upload it to Redbubble. Just like that streak through the middle where there was a bit of misalignment, there's usually some tweaking that the edges need in order to be seamless. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see how I do it. It's super likely that there's some fancy way to do this that involves just a couple of keystrokes, and if you just happen to know it, you're more than welcome to share, but I'm going to continue with my mostly manual construction of this, despite the next phase being digital. I hope this helped you learn a bit about pattern making. It's been super fun for me to just sort of zone out and doodle this nonsense. Let me know if you try it and how things turn out. Until I see you next time, I wish you peace, love, and plushies.